She has never beaten the woman standing across the net from her tomorrow. And somehow, that is not even the strangest part of this story. Because right now, in a city where fewer than 2,000 Filipinos live, fans are lining up before sunrise outside a practice court, waiting to watch a 21-year-old hit warm-up serves. Tournament veterans who have covered this sport for decades are standing at the fence next to them, just as stunned. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why none of it should be happening the way it is happening, and exactly why that's the whole point. If you want to know how a tennis player with barely any local fan base just walked into the third biggest tournament in the country and turned it into the hottest ticket in Ohio, stay to the end, because the answer to that question is bigger than one match, bigger than one city, and it's about to get a lot louder in a much bigger stadium in a couple of weeks. Before we get into it, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Picture the Lindner Family Tennis Center on a morning that's supposed to be quiet. In tennis terms, Cincinnati is the calm before the storm, the last tune-up before the US Open swallows every player whole. It's usually a business trip. Players fly in, practice, play their matches, fly out. Nobody camps outside a fence for it. Except this year, in Mason, Ohio, something is not adding up. Normally, when a WTA event lights up like this, there's a simple explanation. A massive local diaspora shows up for one of their own, the way communities always have in sports. Flags in the stands, generations of families who've done this every single year because it's just what their community does. Toronto had exactly that. Toronto is home to more than 272,000 Filipinos, one of the largest Filipino communities anywhere outside the Philippines. When 21-year-old Eala played there earlier this month, the arena felt like a home match and nobody needed to ask why. Cincinnati doesn't have that. The city's Filipino population sits somewhere between 1,100 and 2,000 people. Even counting the entire state of Ohio, you're looking at roughly 17,000 Filipino Americans total. Do the math on that gap. Toronto's built-in community was well over 100 times the size of what Cincinnati can offer. And yet, by every account from people who were physically in both cities, the atmosphere feels almost identical. That's not a small discrepancy. That's the kind of number that should make this impossible. So to understand why Cincinnati is losing its mind over a player it has almost no demographic reason to support this heavily, you have to rewind to a comeback that, on paper, shouldn't have happened at all. 3 weeks ago, in the middle of a brutal, unglamorous stretch of the summer hardcourt swing, Eala won her very first WTA Tour singles title at the Mubadala DC Open in Washington, a tournament most casual fans wouldn't circle on a calendar. She wasn't the story going in. Over the course of that week, she beat Olympic medalist Zhang Qinwen, defending champion Leylah Fernandez, second seed Alina Svitolina, and third seed Naomi Osaka, before facing top seed Jessica Pegula in a final that got rained out overnight. She dropped the first set. When play resumed the next day, she won the final 8 games of the match. She dropped to the court, put her head in her hands, and admitted afterward that she'd essentially blacked out from nerves. It became the first WTA singles title ever won by a Filipino player. That's the first domino. But here's the detail almost nobody was tracking yet. Tournament chair Mark Ein later revealed that by the closing days of the event, at least 80% of all ticket inquiries were about one single question: when is Eala playing? Then came Toronto, and this is where it stops looking like a hot month and starts looking like something nobody had fully clocked yet. Eala reached the round of 16 of the National Bank Open, and the crowd behavior there was intense enough that she posted on Instagram afterward, calling the arena Barangay Toronto, a nod to the tight-knit, always cheering energy of a Filipino neighborhood basketball league, transplanted into a 12,500-seat Canadian tennis stadium. Tournament organizers even added Filipino dishes like chicken adobo and lumpia to the venue's food service specifically because of how many fans were showing up. And here's the detail that should stop you in your tracks. It wasn't just the fans who noticed. After Eala beat American Katie McNally in the round of 32, McNally reportedly turned to her afterward and thanked her simply for being part of the atmosphere. Sit with that. A player who just lost her match still felt the need to acknowledge that the crowd, the noise, the entire experience belonged to the woman who beat her. That's not normal tournament energy. That's something closer to gravity. Rennae Stubbs, a legendary former world #1 doubles player and now a respected coach and broadcaster, went even further. Speaking on her own podcast, Stubbs said commentators covering the tournament admitted they didn't fully understand the sport of tennis anymore because the crowd's Eala pulls and behave unlike anything they'd witnessed before. Fans erupting midpoint, breaking every rule of tennis etiquette out of pure excitement. Stubbs said she was fully in favor of it, and predicted Eala is going to pull an entire new generation of kids into the sport. That is not casual praise. That's someone with decades of credibility staking her reputation on the idea that this is bigger than one hot month. But here's where the story takes a sharp, uncomfortable turn. All of this adoration is arriving directly ahead of a match that could end Eala's tournament before it really begins. She enters Cincinnati as the 17th seed, the highest seeding of her career, which earns her a bye straight into the second round. And as of today, the opponent waiting there is no longer a mystery. Romania's Elena-Gabriela Ruse beat Poland's Magda Linette 6-0, 6-3 to set up the match, and it is scheduled for August 15th. Here's the part nobody in that crowd wants to think about. Eala has never beaten Ruse. Their only previous meeting was a 3-set loss in 2024 US Open qualifying. And Ruse isn't just dangerous on paper. She's dangerous right now, having just pulled off a jaw-dropping comeback of her own in Toronto last week, rallying from 4 games down in the second set to beat American Peyton Stearns in 3 sets. That's not a player limping into Cincinnati. That's a player who just proved, in the very city Eala left behind, that she thrives specifically in moments where the match looks over. If Eala had drawn Linette instead, the picture would have looked friendlier on the surface. The two have split their 4 career meetings, and Eala has actually won the last 2, at the ASB Classic and the Miami Open. But even that comes with a warning label. Linette, a 34-year-old veteran, knocked out a 5-time Grand Slam champion at the same Miami Open just months earlier. That draw was never a soft landing. It was always going to hand Eala someone dangerous. It just turned out to be the more dangerous of the two. So here's the tension sitting underneath every single person who lined up outside that practice court. They are not showing up because the result feels safe. They know on paper this match could end in heartbreak. And that changes everything about how you should read this crowd. This isn't blind, guaranteed win fandom. This is people choosing to show up anyway, because somewhere along the way, watching her stopped being about the scoreline and started being about something else entirely. There's another layer buried in this story that makes Cincinnati even heavier than it looks from the outside. This is literally Eala's first time ever competing at this specific tournament, the 3rd largest tennis event in the United States, behind only the US Open and the Miami Open. A debut on the back of the single best month of her career, arriving at the tail end of one of the most physically punishing stretches of her season. She has now played more matches this year than any other player currently ranked in the WTA's top 20. 9 matches in 13 days across Washington and the Canadian swing, singles and doubles combined, with barely any recovery time between stops. Her uncle, Nali Eala, a former Philippine Sports Commission chairperson, pointed out publicly that as a top-tier player, WTA rules actually require her to play every single mandatory 1,000-level event and every Grand Slam, whether her body is ready or not. He called it simply the price of success. She is not walking into Cincinnati fresh. She is walking in running on fumes. And the fans lining up before sunrise seem to understand that completely. And they're showing up anyway, treating every practice session like it matters just as much as the match itself. Now here's where you need to understand where she actually came from, because it reframes everything you've just heard. Eala started playing tennis at 4 years old, in a country with very little infrastructure for producing professional players at this level. She eventually earned a scholarship to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Mallorca after winning one of the sport's most prestigious junior events. That's not a polished, guaranteed pipeline. That's the kind of improbable beginning that, when it eventually breaks through, tends to create the most loyal, most emotionally invested fan bases in all of sports, because people aren't just watching a talented athlete. They're watching someone climb from almost nothing in real time, and they feel like they're part of it. And when reporters have asked her about the crowds that have turned every recent stop into something resembling a home match, she keeps circling back to the same idea, that the support isn't really about her individually, that it belongs to something bigger, something that grows right alongside her, city after city. That kind of framing matters more than people realize. A player who pushes the spotlight outward instead of hoarding it tends to build the kind of relationship with an audience that doesn't fade. The kind that multiplies instead of leveling off. It isn't just fans and podcasters saying it either. At Wimbledon this year, after beating defending champion Iga Swiatek on center court in the second round, Eala left such an impression that former Wimbledon champion Barbara Krejcikova, who beat her in an earlier meeting, publicly called her the next generation coming up. And former world number 5 Jeannie Bouchard has compared Eala's rising star power to some of the biggest crossover names the sport has produced in the past 2 decades. So now zoom all the way out, because here's the piece that should really unsettle you if you think about it for more than a few seconds. Tennis fandom has always been built on proximity. Historically, if a player draws a massive crowd in a foreign city, it's because that city has a large population from the player's home country. Decades of infrastructure, local federations selling tickets specifically to that community. Generations of families who show up every single year because that's simply what their community does. Eala doesn't have any of that in Cincinnati. She has months, a handful of months of results. One emotional title run. One dramatic comeback in a rain-delayed final. One electric, adobo-scented week in Toronto. And somehow that alone has been enough to generate a crowd that mirrors a city with well over 100 times the built-in fan base. That's not a fan base she inherited. That's one she is actively building in real time, one tournament at a time, in front of everyone. And if you're wondering why that distinction matters so much, here it is. Community-driven support is powerful, but it's geographically limited by definition. It only shows up where the community already lives. Crossover fandom doesn't work that way. It follows the person, not the population. It shows up in cities with almost no built-in connection to her at all, purely because people have decided they're fans of her specifically. And once a player crosses that line, the ceiling on how far this can travel basically disappears. Which brings us to the part of this story that should make everything you've just heard feel like a warm-up act. The US Open is coming in a matter of weeks. New York is home to one of the largest, most passionate Filipino communities anywhere in the United States. A community that dwarfs what she experienced in Toronto, let alone the tiny population currently packing itself into Cincinnati. Eala is already confirmed to play an exhibition match at Arthur Ashe Stadium later this month, before the tournament even begins. If a city with barely 2,000 Filipino residents is already producing scenes that stun tour veterans, what happens when she walks onto a court in front of a community measured not in the thousands, but in the hundreds of thousands, fully mobilized, fully aware of exactly what they're watching? Cincinnati might not even be the peak of this story. It might just be the preview. And there's one more thing worth sitting with before any of this plays out. Crowd energy isn't just emotional noise. Players talk constantly about how a supportive crowd can shift the actual rhythm of a tight match, how it can hand you an extra half-second of belief on a break point, how it can carry you through a tired third set when your legs are screaming at you to stop. Eala has already shown this season, in that gutting comeback win in the Washington final, that she has the ability to find her best tennis exactly when the moment demands it most. So when she walks out against Elena-Gabriela Ruse, she won't just be facing a dangerous, well-prepared opponent riding her own comeback momentum. She'll be walking out in front of a stadium full of people who have almost no demographic reason to be there in these numbers, and who showed up anyway, fully aware of how hard this match could go. That's the real story sitting underneath the surprise. It was never really about Cincinnati or Toronto before it or Washington before that. It's about a woman who started with almost nothing, who dropped to her knees in tears after the biggest win of her career, who turned one summer into a wave that keeps rolling forward, no matter how small the local welcoming committee is supposed to be. Normally, this kind of crossover appeal takes years to build, sometimes an entire career. She has built the early version of it in a single relentless summer. So whatever happens on Saturday, whoever she ends up facing after that, remember this. The crowd isn't there because the outcome feels safe. It's there because somewhere over the last few months, without a single decade of infrastructure behind her, Eala turned herself into the kind of player people simply choose to follow. City after city, match after match, whether or not there's anyone from home there to greet her. And if Cincinnati really is just the preview, New York is about to find out exactly how loud this can get. If you don't want to miss it, make sure you're subscribed, because we'll be covering every step of it right here.